All right. So since I verified that it will indeed run, I don't want to run it too long with old oil in it, and without the airbox and everything, I had to give it a ton of choke. So I verified that it runs. I am going to do a compression check here shortly, but I wanted to get these carbs off. We're going to clean them out, do a rebuild. I managed to get a box of goodies. I had to order some stuff. So yeah, let's go ahead and start by taking these carbs off. So apparently the earlier GSs used a sort of flanged boot on the head side. This is being an 81, and the newer 16 valve engine looks like it's more of just a traditional boot. They seem to be in okay condition. We'll see better once we get them off. So the choke cable's already been taken off. I still have to get the throttle cable off, but I'm at least going to drop these down and give myself some room. If I can get these guys off in one shot, there we go. There we go. Got that guy out of there. It's a little bit of a closer look here. They're a little grimy, but not too terrible. One reason I mean, besides the obvious that it's been sitting forever, but I noticed that the slides are a little sticky. Either they don't want to push up or they don't want to drop back down again. So we're just going to go ahead and disassemble this whole thing. Got a full set of O-rings found from a guy on the GS forum selling the O-ring kits for a lot cheaper than you can piece them out anywhere else. Also got where are we at here? Oh, right here on the bench. So also got some new float bowl gaskets. So those will be ready. And yeah, so I guess we're just going to start by disassembling these guys. Oh, should have drained those float bowls. That's what I get. That's right. We'll just soak that stuff up. Well, the O-rings in these are totally shot. And that drain screw on the number 4 carburetor has some rust on it, so that doesn't make me feel good about what we're going to find inside that float bowl. All right, jump forward in time a little bit. So you saw me there struggling, trying to hold on to the carbs, trying to get these very stubborn screws loose. And I had a little moment where I'm like, dude, you're going to strip the screw heads, just go get the right tools. For too long in working on stuff, I've always had like the wrong tool for the job, or trying to make do with what I had. And in this case, there's a piece of angle that's like connecting all these carbs together, and the screws are so tight that with a regular Phillips head screwdriver, I was starting to strip the head of the screw out. So I just was like, all right, let's stop. So I picked up a couple things. So I got these sort of a plastic nylon, maybe. I'm not quite sure what they're made out of, but they're these like soft jaw covers, soft, so to speak. They're plastic, so they're softer than the aluminum. so that I could securely get the carbs in the clamp, which just makes a huge difference. And then I got myself a JIS screwdriver. Just picked this up off of Amazon. It's a Vessel brand. If you're working on not even old, if you're working on Japanese stuff, get yourself a JIS screwdriver. It just fits better than a traditional Phillips, especially in Japanese stuff. It just makes your life easier. And then also I got myself, and this is like the critical point. You saw me there trying to hammer on. I was taking my hammer and just a regular screwdriver, and I was trying to put some counterclockwise pressure while tapping it with a hammer. And it was, I was getting there. Get yourself an actual impact screwdriver. So this does exactly what I was trying to do manually, but it's doing it, the right way. It's got a ratcheting mechanism in it. I've never owned one of these things before, but I just, I got tired of fighting with it and tired of boogering up these screws. So like any of these screws that are kind of tight, and this one actually came with JIS screwdriver tips. I was careful to get that. So basically what you do is you just get this thing tight, you give it you push it down, give it a little bit of pressure in the direction you want it to go, and then you just tap on it with a hammer. And there's like a sort of an internal action that kicks it in the counterclockwise. So it literally loosens these things right up. It's ridiculous how easy that is. And this one's a little stuck. You can see the carb bodies are turning a little bit. Let's see if I can. There we go. Got that guy loose. So, having, as I mentioned before, let me get that more snugly set in there. Having the right tools for the job, it makes all the difference in the world. It really does. The older I get, the more I realize that. And where I've been cheap in the past with getting the right tools, this just, seriously, it just makes everything easier. So back off the vise, once I've removed these pieces of metal that were ganging the carbs together, they're really just held together by O-rings. So it's just a matter of pulling them apart. And you can see there's some of the old O-rings that were holding it together. Let's start with number one. I'm going to set these other guys aside. And so what I want to do is I'm just going to break this carb down. I'm going to disassemble it to basically give it a good, deep, thorough cleaning. So I've got these little mixing cups for like mixing up paint or for mixing like epoxy or something like that. So I got 4 of them. I've got them labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'm going to try to keep the parts to the carbs together. So I know that, parts to one go to one. There's certain things like these external screws that are holding on the float bowl and the top here. I don't care if those get mixed and matched. It's just for really the internals, like the seat and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and start breaking this carb down. And part of the reason I wanted to take these apart is because the slides were fairly sticky on them. And right there we can see why. So the old gas has made a sort of a film, like a residue on the slide itself. So it was sticking, and I can see it's going to be tough to pick up on the camera there, but all through there's also this gummy, sticky residue there that's kind of disgusting. So that's going to get all cleaned out here. So I'm also going to take off the float bowl. Here, I don't know, well, you can, yeah, all that fuel just turned to like rusty dust. That's disgusting. So there's our float. There's our main jet. To be honest, I'm not quite sure why there's a little rubber cap on that. And the float is held in place by a pin. This pin has sort of a nail head on it. I don't think it's going to slide right out. Yeah, I'm curious. I want to know if there's a rubber cap in there on all the primary jets. It's very strange. That I can barely see any light through. Barely anything. Here's our primary air. Here's our choke mechanism. Doesn't look too terrible. A little crunchy up there, but otherwise seems pretty clean in there. See a little bit of buildup in the passageways between basically where the carbs feed each other. So there's like a fuel transfer tube that comes through, and then right on top of the needle that I'm trying to get out is where, you know, that fuel is allowed in and out of the float bowl. So I just got to get those floats off. I was able to just smack it with a small screwdriver. So now I can get that pin out and pull out our float, which again, not looking too crusty. It's got a little bit of residue on it. So let's get our needle out. Needle looks pretty good. I'm not seeing like a ridge on it, because a lot of times that needle can get worn. I can maybe just barely see a ridge on it, but that might just be residue. That looks pretty good to me. Not that I'm an expert. There we go. So a little bit of, just a tiny bit of trash. There's like a little filter screen on here. Just the tiniest little bit of trash on that. There's a crunchy, crusty, dried up O-ring. I do have, I believe, let me check my kit over here. Float valve, yes. I do have some float valve O-rings to replace that O-ring. But yeah, the filter's not looking too bad. So that means that whatever crud I'm seeing in there maybe dried up before it made it into, what is that? See that? It's like fuzz. Again, not terrible, not terrible. So the pilot was a little gummy, or a little blocked. I do think this is required, the pilot plug. All right. So now we just need to repeat that 3 more times. All right, so it's a new day. We got some new parts. And the diaphragms on some of these are okay. So the number 4 and number 1 are in pretty good shape. So these slides I'm just going to clean up, not even going to disassemble it. I'm just going to, clean it up and put them back together again. My number 2 is in a little, see if we can get that. You can see a little tear right there. And it's a little mangled around the edge. So that one I wanted to do something about. I wanted to replace. And then my number 3 was totally just, yeah, not great. So I get online and I start looking at, what are my options for fixing these things? And I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I've never done this before. So I disassembled this one slide to just see what I've got. And I've got my needle, and I got a little C-clip holding it in there. And then I have no idea what this little doodad is, but it was in there as well on top of that. So I disassembled this, and I've got some zip ties around that. I'm going to explain that in a minute. So these diaphragms from the factory, they're held in by these plastic rings. There's one on top, and there's one underneath right here. And there's no way that I can figure out how to get that off of there without ruining it. And I think I'm not alone, because I found a company, I think they're called JBM Industries. I'll leave the link down below. And they make diaphragms for a lot of different motorcycle carburetors. Something that they do differently, though, is instead of this little thin like material right here in the center, they actually have that as a big, thick ridge. I think they call it a tire on their website. And it's meant to fill up the gap that if you take off the plastic rings, there's a little gap there that those rings sit in, and it's meant to just snugly sit in there and I think get glued down, according to the website. And so that's what I was looking to do. So I actually went ahead after looking at their website and I cut my rings off. Well, actually, in this case, I didn't cut it off. I heated it with a heat gun and pulled them off once they were soft. So I did that, and then I started looking into what I wanted to order, what I wanted to do. And I mean, they seem to be high quality. They seem to get good reviews, but they're $20 a pop. You know, $20 for a little rubber, like whatever the hell. And I'm just like, man, that's 20 bucks, 40 bucks. If I wanted to replace the other two just so I had a matching set, that's, 80 bucks. I'm like, this is adding up just for a little rubber flap. So I started looking around to see, okay, what else is there out there? And so in doing a little bit of research, and in no small part to the help on that JBM Industries website, so there's a couple things you need to know about ordering diaphragms. So first off, in the carb itself, there's a seat that the diaphragm sits in, and you need to find out what that measurement is. And on my carburetor, this is a 70 millimeter ring, okay? The other thing that they want to know is what's the diameter of the slide, and specifically, like, what's the diameter where that sits, where the diaphragm sits. And then based on those measurements, they'll recommend, this particular whatever model of diaphragm. So I started looking and doing a little bit of research to try to see, well, what other carburetors have the same size diaphragm? So this is a 32 millimeter carburetor, and specifically that's referring to the output side, I believe, is the 32 millimeters. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong on that. But apparently there is a 34 millimeter that was a lot more used in different bikes. So there's a lot more of them, and there's a lot more parts for them. So, okay, well, if they have the same size slide and they have the same size ring for it to seat into, okay, well, let's see what there is for that. So I get on eBay and I find a set of 4 diaphragms matching those dimensions for 12 bucks. $12. And I thought, well, you know what? For $12, I mean, shit, I'll try it, right? I'll see if they work. And if they don't work, well, then I'm out 12 bucks. But if they do work, heck, I learned something, and maybe I can help other people out as well. So, like I said, I got 2 that need to be replaced here. The first one, I've seen a video where somebody actually peeled out the old diaphragm and then managed to slip the new one on. They used some silicone. I'm going to grab some silicone spray, and they literally try to squeeze it and work it back in between the original rings. So I'm going to try to do that on this guy that I haven't mangled yet. However, the one that I did mangle, the one that I was going to use, with the thicker tire or whatever from JBM, well, I'm like, well, crap. Well, now I've got this, I don't have my rings. This replacement diaphragm from eBay does not have a thick, 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter ring or whatever at the base of it. Well, did I just screw myself up? Well, it actually fits fairly snugly on here. So if I go ahead and pull this over the slide, that's a pretty snug fit on there. Now, I am worried about it popping off. So what I did was I went online and I found some 2 millimeter wide zip ties. It's about 4 or 5 millimeters in there. So, I mean, the 2 millimeter, I mean, of course, the length is too short, so I had to double up on it. But I'm going to put two of those zip ties below, and then I'm going to put 2 zip ties above to act as a capture ring because I melted my old rings off. And we're going to see how well that holds. What the heck? It's worth a try. Like I said, I got the whole set for $12, so we're gonna go ahead and give this a shot. Now, like I said, I saw a video where somebody pulled this out and then put a new one on, and they used a silicone lubricant. I don't have a silicone spray, but I want to use something that is safe for rubber. So I'm gonna use some dielectric grease. I'm hoping that that doesn't screw me up. But yeah, so what they did in their video is they just carefully went through here and just sort of pulled. Now, maybe it's going to take a little bit more force than I thought. They pulled, there we go. So you can see how that diaphragm is starting to separate. So they just pulled and separated the diaphragm from the rings. Oh, I just tore it. Let's see if I can smoothly get the rest of that out. If I tear that, then I'm really going to have to remove the rings, and this whole experiment's going to go down the tubes. So we're going to pull that out carefully. Come on. There we go. All right. And so this, I'm looking at that little lip right there. That looks very, very similar to the lip that's on my replacement. So the trick now is, can I get this not only over the ring, but seated in between those 2 plastic rings? And if I can't, well, then I'm just going to heat them up and melt them off like I did for the other one. And one of the other things you have to be concerned with when you do this, if you attempt this, so the carb body itself has a little indent to index those diaphragms. So the diaphragm goes on the slide a certain way, and that needs to be clocked a certain way inside of the carburetor. And again, I'm learning here. So the bottom of the slide has that little hole. That hole is supposed to draw the vacuum that pulls the slide down, right, into the carb body. So that hole needs to face a very specific direction, and in my case, it has to point back towards the engine side of the carburetor. So that hole, I need to make sure when I get my diaphragm on there that that hole is pointing on the back side, going that way, so that vacuum from the engine pulls down on that diaphragm and pulls down on the slide. I'm pretty sure that's how it works, or what that's meant to do. I do know for a fact that I'm getting the indexing of it right, but I believe that's why. So let's see if we can get this on here. So I'm going to grab one of these guys. Like I said, $12. It's meant to fit the 34 millimeter variant of this carb, but the dimensions are exactly alike. I'm going to put just a little dielectric grease around that edge that I want to slip in between the 2 plastic rings on this guy. So I have no idea how this is going to go. Let's see if we can get this in here. So I'm just going to start. If I can get one part of it started, I think the rest of it might go okay. So all right, y'all, I think I found something that works. So I didn't want to damage it, so I got a little plastic, I think they call this a spudger for like taking apart interior body trim. So I'm using that to tuck the ring of the diaphragm down in between those plastic rings. And that seems to, voila, that seems to have done the trick. Now I'll probably give it a little tug here and there and just to make sure that it's stuck in there, but I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So yeah, little spudger, was able to spread those apart and jam that down in there. It's a shame that I didn't discover that before, hacking apart this one. If this doesn't end up working, I'll probably pick up one of those $20 jobs because it's cheaper than trying to find a new slide assembly. But yeah, I mean, we'll try this on one of the carbs, but that definitely works. A little dielectric grease, little plastic spudger, poke it in there carefully, right? Getting that diaphragm seated down in there, and we are good to go. But once again, I didn't clock it right, so I'm going to have to try to spin this thing around and get it set up properly. But all right, so we're trying to get these carbs finally cleaned out. Got them totally disassembled. So what I did was I went out, got a big old bucket of Berryman carb dip. I've used this stuff once before on a boat carburetor that I had years and years ago. Berryman makes good stuff in my opinion. So I picked this up. It was like $40 for the gallon. Hopefully I'll have further future projects that I can try to get my money's worth out of this thing. But anyway, so basically what you want to do is you want to soak your parts in this, and depending on their filthiness, you know, you can soak them for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. I think the can says something like, you know, you want to minimize your amount of time because it's pretty potent stuff. One guy online I saw said soak for 24 hours, but I think that's overkill, especially for these carburetors. So basically, this thing comes in a little basket, and I'm going to go ahead and start putting some carb parts in here. And it's a small basket in this case, but I'm going to go ahead and start putting some of these carb bits in there. And this is my number one. So I'm also going to grab, let me dump out my, we'll just go ahead and we'll set that down in there for the time being. Anything that I want to soak. Now, it shouldn't be anything with rubber on it. Now, most of these should have been disassembled to this point where there is no rubber, but I still have like an O-ring on the seat for the needle. I don't really want to soak that anyway. There's not really anything small in there, but like the actual jets, those are going to go in my basket. So let's take all those guys. Make sure I drop into my basket, and I think that's everything that I want to put in there for now. The rest of this stuff is pretty straightforward. So this is pretty, like I said, pretty potent stuff. I like to go ahead, dump that in there, set it for about 10-15 minutes, pull it out, rinse it with water, and then I spray it clean with some carbon choke cleaner. So I'm going to do these parts 10-15 minutes. Then I'm going to do the main number one carb body, 10-15 minutes. Like I said, I got a little pan of water down here that I can, after pulling them out of this, I dunk them in water and then spray out all the openings and stuff before we start reassembly. So yeah, we'll pause here, go through the dunking and cleaning process, and we'll come back. So a little update on these slides and the diaphragms. I already showed you how I was able to replace one of the diaphragms over top of these plastic retainer rings just by basically pulling out the old one, lubing up the new with a little bit of dielectric grease, and then using a plastic spudger to just sort of gently push it between the rings until it was fully seated. And that worked really well. This is actually one of the old diaphragms on this one, but I just have it here as an example. So this slide still has the original plastic ring inside and outside. Now, there is that JBM Industries with a thicker ridge on the inner part of the diaphragm is supposed to fit nicely inside of this groove on the slide. So if you decide you want to use one of their diaphragms, you actually have to cut off or otherwise remove these plastic rings, which I can't find replacements for. So the negative part of that is once you remove them, like I've done with this guy, and I just heated him up with a heat gun and a pair of pliers, so heat gun, popped it right off, is once you do that, you're kind of stuck, right? You have to use one of their type diaphragms or come up with some other kind of solution. And previously I'd shown where I was trying to use like a zip tie as a retainer ring. The more I looked at it, the more I thought about it, the junkier that looked, so I didn't really care for that. So I decided to try something different, and I don't know if I'm going to stick with it yet. I may for a short term. But what I went out and I ordered off of Amazon is a bag of O-rings. So I got these big old O-rings that fit really perfectly around this slide. And if I put the diaphragm on, I can secure it in place with an O-ring. Now, one minor issue is the O-rings that I got are so thick that they don't quite fit in the groove with the diaphragm. I can sort of, I can tuck it in there, and it's, it's not going anywhere. It definitely does the job of retaining the diaphragm. So I'm fine with that, as a test at least. But where I'm unsure now is I discovered that the plastic ring also acts as a form of a stop. So here I have one of my carbs, and if I go ahead and drop the slide in, I'm not really concerned about its exact position at this time, but if I just go ahead and drop that slide in, you can see that the slide doesn't quite drop all the way down. So it's actually hitting the O-ring. And if I compare that to one of the original slides, it also leaves a gap, but it's not as big of a gap. So in thinking about this, I'm a little concerned that running an O-ring on the bottom of this is going to have the same effect at idle as shimming the needle a little bit, which is going to change the air-fuel ratio. So I don't know how much of a big deal that is. I'm kind of going back and forth right now on whether or not I keep the lower O-ring, or do I leave the lower O-ring off completely and let the diaphragm just be captured by the top O-ring, which will allow for a little bit of up and down vertical play there in the middle. Now, the benefit of that is if I run that with no O-ring, it seats all the way down to the end. There's like a little side groove cut that the slide can fit into. It seats all the way down into that, which is actually a little bit further than with the plastic ring on the original. So again, I'm changing the air-fuel ratio a little bit here because now the needle is further down. But the difference is less, if that makes sense, between an original ring and no O-ring is closer in their location than running an O-ring. The O-ring holds it up just a little bit too far for my liking. So I'm kind of thinking that's what I'm going to do. The way, this works, I feel like the top seal is more important than the underside seal. I may be wrong on that, but I feel like if my understanding of these things is correct, that's a little bit more critical. So I think I might try to run this as is with the O-ring. The only other thing I can think of is I found on eBay somebody selling one of these full carbs, in need of a rebuild, but I could harvest the slide and any other bits off of it that I wanted to get. So this is kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm getting close to putting this all back together. I got two all the way together. One of them is almost finished. One is still completely apart. But I've just been dancing around this, and I think this is what I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to run top O-ring only. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. So I got the carbs mostly reassembled. Basically just a reverse of everything that I did before. Now, this is the, I think, last update to the diaphragm saga. I have decided to give up on my previous attempts of trying to use zip ties or trying to use O-rings. I wasn't happy with any of them. See, I found once I had everything together, so you can actually come in here and like push up on the slides, and they have like a little bit of a resistance because of the diaphragms, and then the springs push them back down into their original position. What I discovered that was with my sort of homegrown solution, when I had cut off those plastic rings, I don't think it was getting a good seal. I could push up on the diaphragm and feel almost no resistance beyond the spring. It's kind of hard to describe, but there's like a little bit of a pressure, and you can hear it. There's like a little vacuumy sound that I was not getting with my, like I said, with O-rings or zip ties or anything that I tried. So I had another issue. The original float bowl and drain screw in carburetor number 4 had some rust in the bottom of it. I don't know how much you can see that, but also the screw itself rusted, and the threads don't really hold it in there anymore real well, and I was afraid of that leaking. I was afraid of that falling out. And when I priced replacing just this screw, which is a really weird thread pattern apparently, it's like $8 on Partzilla, and I couldn't believe that for a single screw that I couldn't find anywhere else. So I had two issues. I got a float bowl with a bad screw. I've got a diaphragm that I'm not happy with. And luckily, I was able to jump on eBay, and I was able to find a used BS32SS carburetor, which is the exact same type of carburetor that I'm dealing with here. So I sort of bought it to harvest it for parts. I grabbed the float bowl, rust-free float bowl, the float bowl screw matching off of it. I pulled out the slide and the diaphragm, which is what we have right here. I did put my needle back into it because I wasn't sure. I didn't really look closely, but I wasn't sure of what bike this came off of and if it might be a different needle size. So I put my needle in it. The diaphragm is in good shape, so I didn't replace it. I just used my parts in it. So that's what I ended up doing. Kind of like I said before, if you decide to cut off those plastic rings, you're kind of beholden to that company that makes the special diaphragms with the thick band. If you need to replace your diaphragm, you can keep those plastic rings, just pop them off. There's some cheap ones off of eBay. These are BS34 diaphragms, but they fit the BS32 carburetor as well. So I got that, and that's basically what we're going with. We're going to go ahead and slide that guy in there. That's something else that I noticed was different between the new carb off of eBay and my carb is much different spring. So I'm reusing my spring as well with this diaphragm. Remember, the diaphragms get indexed, so I'm making sure that that whole diaphragm and the slide itself are indexed properly, because the vacuum side is what causes the magic to happen. But honestly, if you've never done this before, rebuilding carbs is really not that difficult. It's a little tedious, you want to make sure that you've got the right tools. You want to make sure that all of the orifices and jets and things like that are clear. So, some carbon choke spray, some chem dip. All those things kind of come together to help clean things up. It's not perfect, but the inside of it is pretty dang clean. I'm pretty happy with the results there. So let's get these guys torqued down. So that's kind of the saga of the carburetors. They are back together. I have my engine side boots on here. Everything has been reassembled. Even down to like my idle mixture screw and my choke and everything is all back together again. So at this point, it's ready to go right back on the bike. I also need to get the engine cleaned out still. Or sorry, not the engine. I need to get the fuel tank cleaned out still. Maybe I'll do that next. But yeah, those are my carbs, one step closer.